Welcome to Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now you can learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property. Learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau with the Mineola law firm of Shane, Dox, Denisi, and Corker. He's a member of the Committee on Professional Ethics of the Bar Association of Nassau County and counsel to the Nassau Academy of Law. And now, here is your host for Law You Should Know, attorney Kenneth J. Landau.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Today our program is about the Nassau County Magistrates Association, and our guest is Susan Katz Richman, and she is an attorney, and she is also a magistrate or village judge, and she is the president of the Nassau County Magistrates Association. And Sue, welcome back to Law You Should Know, and congratulations on becoming president of the organization.
Thanks, Ken. It's great to be here.
And before we start out, just explain to our listeners what a magistrate is, and especially the magistrates in Nassau County.
Basically, a magistrate, the kind of magistrates that we are in the association, is the judge who presides over village court proceedings. Essentially, we ensure that when we are the courts closest to the people. 90% of the public never gets into a regular courtroom, thank heavens, but many do end up with parking tickets, traffic tickets, and other sort of code violations and appear in the village court. The role of a magistrate or a village judge is to ensure that those before us know the charges against them, know their rights, and that we ensure the fair and effective administration of justice in each and every one of our cases.
And the magistrate is also acting as the fact finder. I mean, they're deciding, there's no jury, and they're deciding the facts and if the burden of proof has been met? Correct.
There's just so that you understand where we fit in, there are about 60 village justice courts in Nassau County and approximately 120 village judges in our county. And I'm proud to say that all of the village judges in Nassau County are attorneys. Those village judges are magistrates. There are other kinds of magistrates that are attorneys, but our judges are other kinds of judges, like a federal magistrate. There are support magistrates, but we are the village magistrates.
And in our program today, we're talking about the village magistrates and their courts and their jurisdiction and their role.
Correct.
And these are very local courts. So if someone gets a ticket within a village, it will be returnable, or some kind of violation within a village, it will be returnable in the village court.
Correct, and especially if it's written under a village code, not if it's a felony.
And so what types of matters are going to come before the village court?
Generally speaking, we handle a lot of alleged violations of village codes, and every village has their own code. Many of them are adopted from a common one, but they might have certain nuances. So code violations, including parking violations, as well as vehicle and traffic law violations that were issued within the village's limits.
So even if it's given by, let's say, a Nassau County police officer, if it's issued within a village, it's going to be returnable in that village?
Correct.
And the zoning violation could be for a home or a business or someone else violating some aspect of the village code.
Correct. And or, for example, the state fire code, if a restaurant were to get such tickets.
And in terms of criminal violations occurring within the confines of the village?
There are offenses or violations under the codes and the laws that you can do up to, say, for example, 15 days in jail, even some traffic matters that, yes, would come into the village court.
Okay. And so a person's usually given a ticket to appear at a future time to answer.
Yes, that would be their arraignment, and that's where the job of the village judge or the magistrate is to make sure they understand the nature of the charges against them and their rights and you understand your rights with respect to the proceedings that follow.
And the ticket will usually have some kind of instructions for pleading not guilty, for pleading guilty.
Correct.
And the person has to send it back to the village clerk.
You have to. One of my suggestions to everybody is you always read the ticket, especially the back. Sometimes, a lot of times it'll say you plead not guilty and mail it back. Other times it just says you must appear in court on a certain date and time.
And there's usually some kind of deadline.
Yes.
And it's important that deadline not be passed because then it becomes a bigger problem.
Yes, at any time in these proceedings from the start, if you miss a deadline or fail to appear, you run the risk, for example, of having your license suspended or other negative things happening.
And if a person goes on that court date or the return date on the ticket for any of those categories, what can they expect to happen?
Well, most of the village courts sit once or at least once or twice a month. And many of them, I sit in two courts. I sit in Seacliff and Plandome Manor, for example, and I cover other such courts if there's a conflict or something. But basically, in Seacliff, for example, we have an arraignment date and then we have a conference trial date. When somebody comes in the first time, they can expect to be told what their rights are, what the charges are against them. The village judge needs to make sure that the person understands that, and then they'll be told what their trial rights are, and I believe they'll also be informed that they have the right to have a conference with the prosecutor in the village, which could be a village prosecutor, or it could be a village attorney, and that they can conference and see if they can try to resolve the case before they ever get to trial.
Can that happen, that initial appearance?
It can in certain villages. It depends which one and how often they meet and what their procedures and policies are. But you can always, if anyone does get a ticket returnable in a village court, you can always go online and check that village's procedures or call that village's court clerk.
Or perhaps go there.
Yes, or you can go there during business. Some of the villages are very small and the offices are not always open, but yes, you can go there and ask ahead of time.
And somewhere in that village is going to be a courtroom or a courthouse.
I can't think of any off the top of my head that have their own courthouse.
It might be in the municipal hall or the village hall.
Generally, it's in the village hall.
And some villages have more than one magistrate.
Yes, most villages have two magistrates. One is a village judge or village justice. One is elected, and quite frequently, except in a couple of villages like Rockville Center, there's two elected village judges. Otherwise, the second judge is appointed. And that's the associate judge who is there to avoid any kind of conflicts. And if there is a scheduling problem or a family conflict or a relationship that requires a recusal, a judge excusing themselves from a certain matter, then the second judge who was appointed can preside. And the
most villages or the larger ones have more than one village prosecutor, and that also may be a part-time job.
Yes, these are the village judges are part-time.
And the prosecutors.
And the prosecutors are also part-time.
And at that initial appearance, can a person try to work out some kind of plea or plead a part of it in satisfaction of the entire, whatever the charges are?
Well, Kenny, you're referring to plea bargaining, which is not a dirty word, not even to me as a village judge or a former prosecutor for the county. That's called a conference. That's not really something the judge is involved in. That's between the prosecutor and the person who got the ticket, the defendant, and if they can have that conversation if the court's procedures allow the same day as the arraignment. Otherwise, they'll be offered the opportunity, if they want such a conference, to come back on another date. It's very rare to have to appear more than twice.
Right, and the village judge is not part of that. That's between whoever's
Correct.
acting as the prosecutor and the defendant.
Yes. However, any plea bargain agreement is subject to the court, the judge's approval. And again, the judge is never going to approve a disposition without trial if they don't think it's in the best interest of both sides and the public.
And the village prosecutor may look at the person's driving record, as might the village magistrate.
Correct.
Or the village judge.
Correct.
And the amount of the fine, again, that would be negotiated with the village prosecutor, but have to be approved by the judge.
Okay. Again, everything is subject to the court's approval. Right. The village prosecutor can make a recommendation for a particular sentence within the confines set by the law. There may be there's usually a sentencing range. And the court can, after hearing what the prosecutor recommends and or what the defendant says or has to offer, and then either go with the prosecutor's recommendation because that's what they worked out with the defendant, or indicate that that's not acceptable and that they should reconference it.
And we'll talk about trials and mitigating circumstances. But if the person feels there are some mitigating circumstances, they can explain them to the prosecutor.
In the first instance.
If they're not sympathetic, at the appropriate time, they can bring them to the attention of the judge.
Yes and no. They can explain them to the prosecutor in the conference in the hope of getting a reduced disposition. And if the prosecutor doesn't offer it, the judge can't. But no one can stop. You can never stop someone, if they so desire, to plead guilty. You don't need the prosecutor's permission to reduce a charge or make a plea bargain. If somebody wants to come in, say it's a parking ticket, and they want to come in and plead guilty with an explanation, then they'll be pleading guilty. I'll go through the allocution with them, make sure they understand all their trial rights that a plea of guilty waives, but then I'll hear their explanation with respect to any sentence I would impose.
And does that work for a moving violation as well?
Again, yes, in terms of the conference, and an explanation may prompt a prosecutor to recommend a reduced plea to a lesser point type violation. But as far as the court goes, it's what you're pleading guilty to. If the plea is accepted, that will determine what the fine is and so on. And the court does not have any discretion on DMV points awarded for moving violations, even reduced moving violations. If you plead guilty and you waive your rights, that's the same as a conviction after trial of any reduced plea.
This is the points on the reduced plea.
Yes.
And there are also surcharges, or there could be surcharges, and those are not negotiable.
Not negotiable. The court has, I always tell everybody, I have no discretion, even though
And there could be insurance or other consequences, and again, that's outside the court's bailiwick.
It is, but I feel that it's my responsibility, and I make sure when I arraign people and I tell them what the charges are, that they understand that also it may affect their insurance rates, and certain point totals can affect their licenses and so on.
Okay, and we're going to take a short break now. When we return, we'll talk about the trial and whether someone needs an attorney and what kind of documents and demeanor and decorum, and even the dress code is appropriate when they have to go to the village court to avoid problems and cast themselves in the best possible light. We are talking about the Nassau County Magistrates. My guest is Susan Katz Richman, and she is the president of the Nassau County Magistrates Association, and she herself, as you've heard, is a village judge. You're listening to Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, Long Island, New York, and also over the internet at ncc.edu/WHPC. We'll be back in a moment.
Since 1899, the Nassau County Bar Association has been helping both the public and lawyers who work here. We have grown to become the largest suburban bar association in the country. Today, we offer many free services to the public, including clinics where you can meet privately with an attorney to prevent or solve legal problems involving Hurricane Sandy, foreclosure, wills, or elder law. We also offer free speakers on almost any legal topic to schools or community groups, and we can advise you of other low-cost or free legal resources. We also help lawyers to advance their legal careers and offer a place to network, along with many low-cost continuing legal education programs. We continue to help the public and lawyers in new ways every day. Put the resources of Nassau County Bar Association to work for you. Call 516-747-4070 or visit nassaubar.org. We are here to help you.
Once again, we continue with Law You Should Know. From the Mineola Law Firm of Shane, Dox, Denise, Corker, and Sauer, here is attorney Kenneth J. Landau.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome back to Law You Should Know. We're talking about the Nassau County Magistrates Association and really about the village courts throughout Nassau County. And our guest is Susan Katz Richman. She is the president of the Nassau County Magistrates Association, and she's also a village judge herself, as well as being a past president of the Nassau County Bar Association, and involved in many activities of service to the community, including being past president of the board of directors of We Care. And Sue, if someone is coming to court and let's say they want a trial, the negotiations have failed. What are the procedures going to be when they return for a trial?
Well, first of all, everyone has a right to a trial,